Welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast with Gary Helt. Gary is an expert in helping business owners put together a plan that will provide a better future for their businesses, themselves, and their families. On the podcast, Gary interviews other professionals who share his vision, and together they share secrets and strategies any business owner can use to build a better financial foundation for your business and your life.
Welcome back to the podcast. This week, our guest is Maureen Murat, who is an attorney advisor in the Office of General Counsel with the DC Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking. Welcome, Maureen.
Hi, Gary. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I
guess you have to go around and say who you are and what you do. That's a mouthful right there.
Yeah, well, we normally say DISB for short. I probably should have told you that.
So what made you get into law?
I kind of fell into it. I was actually in nursing school way back when, and I started working part-time at a law office. It was a bankruptcy law office. Initially, I started mailing out her, back then they used to mail out advertisements right. And for people who wanted to file bankruptcy. And so, but the more I worked there, a couple people left or got fired. So then I got more responsibility. I was like, oh, this might be what I really like to do. So I kind of changed course and then changed my major. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to go to law school instead.
Now, how did you end up getting over to the General Counsel office?
So before I joined this office, I was at a small firm here in DC. And at that firm, we were helping small businesses who wanted to raise capital. So a lot of times they were Fintech businesses. Mm-hmm. This was also a time where, they call it the, wild, wild west of crypto, right? So this is right. 2016, 2017, 2018. And I was working there and we were helping people, trying to figure out what the laws were because the SEC hadn't figured it out either. And we could talk about that later, and also trying to help people still raise capital while trying to build up these new innovative types of businesses. And so a friend of mine that I used to work with in a different office actually worked here. So someone had told me I should apply for this job. I was like, oh, I'm on the outside. I don't know if I want to go to the other side. Right. So I called her and asked her, how do you like working there, et cetera. She's like, oh, you should come. It's like one of the best DC agencies, et cetera. So when I applied, I really didn't think anything of it. I was like, okay, I'll just apply. And then months went by and I never heard anything. So I was like, oh, okay, well, it didn't work out. Right. And then I got called a few months later. I think I applied in March and I got called in June. So anyway, yeah, so that's how I ended up here.
So now what does the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking, what are your guys' responsibilities?
So we initially are regulators, and I told you this at the beginning, and of course I forgot as soon as we started talking. My disclaimer right. that everything that I say here today is not necessarily the position of the mayor or the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking. So there's that. But so the department is a regulator, but we're also very in tune with the consumer, right? So we want to make sure that we're kind of balanced so that we're regulating these entities that are providing these financial services, but at the same time, and making sure that they have, opportunities for business here, but at the same time, making sure that our residents, their constituents, their customers are treated fairly and, have these consumer protections kind of built into whatever product or service they're offering. Right. So we have a whole bunch of different offices. So like you said, we have the Insurance, Securities, and Banking Bureau. We have an Office of Financial Education and Empowerment. We are also creating an Office of Innovation. So all of these things are supposed to kind of align to make sure that there's a balance in the industry.
Right. Now, but you're primarily on the banking side, correct?
Yes.
So can you talk to us a little bit about that? I know we were talking about, people who are money transfers and what that means. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So on the banking side, we mainly focus on financial institutions that provide some type of banking service, whether it be, a traditional bank, a depository bank, or a non-depository bank. So one of the license types or one of the entities that we regulate are money transmitters, but we also regulate mortgage lenders, mortgage brokers, originators, check cashers, ATM machines, student loan servicers, and all that. There are 13 different types of licenses, so I won't, bore you with all of them. But in terms of the money transmitters, that, tends to be one of the most popular, I guess, licenses to get because of what you can do with the license, right? Essentially, you are engaging in the act of either receiving money for transmission or transmitting that money, right? Mm-hmm. So normally there's a 3-party system here. So you have the person sending the funds, you have the intermediary in the middle, the money transmitter, and then you have the receiver on the other end. And so these 3 parties are essentially moving money back and forth so that you can, it could be for any reason, right? And the money transmitter also tends to not only just move dollars, right? You move money. So the money could be from US dollars to euros. It could be from, I don't know what other currency. So from currency to currency, but then, but the new thing now, or newish thing, I should say, is also being able to move or transmit Bitcoin for dollars or vice versa through an intermediary.
So that license that intermediary gets is because they are taking money or of some type of currency. It could be crypto or it could be, other national currency. They're taking that, they're collecting a fee to convert it to whatever you're asking them to convert to and paying it to whoever you ask them to pay it to. So you guys are regulating, making sure that if I'm the intermediary, I'm not ripping people off.
Yes, you're not ripping people off and you're not laundering money, right? We need to we know where the money came from. It went through you and we know where it's going. Yes. Right.
So that intermediary, their responsibility is to make sure that they know where the funds have come from.
Right.
Okay. Is it kind of the same thing that's going on in banking now? When somebody goes in, deposits large amounts of cash while they're being asked, hey, where'd you get this from?
Right. And that really came about as a result of the Dodd-Frank Act because of the crash from, I guess, 15 years ago. Yep. And yes, that's essentially it. They want to be able to track those funds. And I think most recently I saw that, I don't know if it was the IRS and Venmo saying that people have to report a certain amount now. I think it's like $600 is very low. So it's also getting it's getting interesting because, that's such a low number, right? The Dodd-Frank Act is like $10,000 and then, but anyway.
And because I understand that side of it, the Venmo and the PayPals and all that stuff. What they're doing is that and eBay is part of this also. Any of those exchanges like that, you're giving them a 1099. It's called a 1099K. And it's because somebody's given you money. And because so many people have started using the Venmo and things like that to accept payment as a business for rentals or whatever it is, that they're trying to find a way to regulate that.
I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that's difficult because from my side of things, the tax side of things, we have clients that are coming in and say, hey, I got this K1, but this is just, with my kids in school and I'm sending them money through Venmo or some other type of cash app. Why am I getting this? So, we still have to handle it because otherwise IRS will ask the questions.
They have those obligations. Yeah.
Yes. Now, with some of these intermediaries and things like that, are they FDIC insured?
They are not, because they are considered non-depository institutions.
Okay.
So no, they are not. But they do have to register with the federal government. So FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, they have a registration process for what they call MSBs, money service businesses. So you do still have to register with them to let them know that you want to enter in this type of business, but your licenses will come from any state that you want to actually operate in. So a lot of times you'll have that registration and you'll have your MSB number, and you do have to share it with the state or DC, the jurisdiction, but you have to apply for one in each state you want to operate in.
What happens then? I mean, how is it? So I'm the intermediary. You give me, your Bitcoin, and you wanted me to convert it to dollars, and you want me to pay it to whoever. How does it work when I get the Bitcoin from you, I do the conversion, I send it to who you tell me to send it to, and what happens if that's not the right person? Because I'm seeing more and more people getting these emails business-wise that, hey, here's your invoice, pay, here's where you need to pay it to, the wiring instructions, but that's not really the company. So,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I maybe we could talk a little more about that offline, but but generally, at least how DISB sees those transactions, if you're receiving the money or an equivalent to money, right? So something that's considered a medium of exchange, then you, which includes Bitcoin, right? And if you're sending that for transmission and I'm the intermediary and I am storing or taking custody of that Bitcoin or other virtual currencies or, national currencies, and then I'm engaging in the business of money transmission, right? Moving it along for you, then you would require to buy a license. But it's different. And I kind of want to make the distinction between if someone, let's say, walked up to a BTM, an ATM, right? And they just sold their Bitcoin and walked away, got a little receipt and all that. That's not considered money transmission. If you hopefully it makes sense.
Actually depositing it.
Right. You're just depositing. Or let's say because there are BTMs that are one way, right? So you're either selling or buying, but then there are BTMs that are two way where you can do both. And so if you're doing both, then we're stepping into money transmission land, if you will. But if you're sending funds through an intermediary and the intermediary sends it to someone and it's not who you think it was, I think that's more of a consumer protection issue. And we have seen where, unfortunately, because I guess there's a lot of hype around it. That people kind of get, suckered in, suckered in and are scammed essentially, because it's even with all of what's going on, we have to, we know that the underlying technology for cryptocurrency is blockchain. But to be clear, these companies that are exchanging or transmitting these funds for you are not running on blockchain, right? They are, they are on Web 2 regular internet services. They use APIs, all that they're not using anything innovative, let's say, even though they might have better controls and protections nowadays because we have two-factor authentication, et cetera. But essentially, these things are not running on blockchain. So when you do send it to someone who is not who you think they are, it's really hard to get it back because even though we know that those funds went through, an intermediary, went to that person and went to that wallet, that wallet still may not be attached. Wallet, you might be able to attach it to an IP address or something like that, but not a name. It won't say Gary, on the other end, right? It won't say my name necessarily on the other end. So we do have to be really careful about where we're sending funds. Yeah.
I've even seen with Venmo how people are trying to spoof somebody else's name, and it's just like, I mean, if you're not really paying attention, it's off by one character type thing. So I've definitely seen that. So getting back to the licensing piece, and you're talking about the ATMs and BTMs and stuff like that. So if I own a ATM and I'm putting it wherever, I have to have a license to be able to do that, correct?
If you own, you mean like a traditional ATM?
Yeah, I own the ATM, but I'm putting it in whatever, a store in DC.
Yes, you do have to be registered to do that. Yes.
Okay. That's something, because I know a lot of people are business wise that look at having ATMs as a lucrative business.
Right.
And things. So I didn't know who regulated that. I thought that was, it's like, okay, each one of them's independent and, I'm going to say use at your own risk if it's not a bank ATM.
Right. So if it's not a bank ATM, yes, and it's an owner operated ATM, so it's your private one, yes, you would have to register with DISB. If it's a bank operated one, then they don't register with DISB. They're considered national banks. They're already regulated by the federal government.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm independently own that ATM, do I have to have any type of signage or anything on it saying that this is not owned by a bank, this is an independent ATM?
So a lot of ATMs in the city are partner with banks, actually, right? Because they need a bank to kind of help them fund those ATMs. But what is required, so it's not required to say I'm not a national bank. I think it's almost kind of obvious, honestly, because a national bank will have, SunTrust all over it. Well, not SunTrust anymore, but, whatever the name of the bank all over it. But for the district, you are required to have information on that ATM to show that you are registered with us. It's a decal, or we call it a sticker. And then you also have to have prominently displayed your information so that if something were to, happen with the machine or something like that, that they could call you to make a complaint or to, fix whatever the issue is. Yeah. So it's pretty simple, I think. I mean, we have a lot of ATMs in the city, if you can imagine. So, and they're all over. So.
Right. So we've gone through a lot quickly here.
Yeah.
It's like I could keep going because I find a lot of this fascinating. Because part of it because I don't know a lot about it, but just the whole not knowing the regulations and not knowing that, okay, now there is this extra layer that's there. I mean, to me, it makes me feel a little bit more comfortable, but it's still buyer beware. You want to make sure that if you're using any type of a money transfer or anything, that they are reputable and you kind of know who they are type thing. Because otherwise, again, you could lose your money.
Right. Yes. Right. And it's really unfortunate, but to your point, that's why you have to really be careful. I don't know if you've heard of, because I know you were saying people were spoofing Venmo addresses, but I mean, this is also not new, right? People do that with email addresses all the time. So it's just moving along with innovation. As things innovate, scammers find ways to engage in that kind of, illicit activity. So we do have to be extra vigilant. Yeah.
So what have I not asked you that you wish I would have?
That is a good question. I think one thing that I want to make sure that we cover, because I know we talked, mostly about money transmission and Bitcoin activity and things like that, is to also be mindful that, things can change, right? So sometimes because of the news cycle and because of the federal government's involvement in a lot of this, things can change pretty quickly. So I think it's a good idea to really keep up with what's going on in the world outside of Twitter or wherever we get our news, because I get my news from Twitter sometimes too, I'll admit. Right. But, to just to your point about, reputable sites, but also reputable places where you can get information about what's going on. And I think the best way to get information about licensing or regulations or anything like that in any jurisdiction is to go to the site, right? The website that that talks about it, of the agency's website, as opposed to, because I know I often see a lot of articles and stuff online that'll say, oh, this is what you can do in DC. This is what you can't do in DC or New York or wherever. But I think the best source is the actual agency's website.
Yeah. So that was going to be kind of you led me right into it.
Okay.
If somebody wants to talk to you or they want to learn more about this in DC, how can they get in touch with you or get in touch with your agency to get more information?
So we have our general email, which is DISB, DISB at dc.gov. If it's banking related, we have the banking bureau at dc.gov. For myself, my email is Maureen Murat. Maureen.Murat, I should say, at dc.gov. We also have, DISB's on social media. So they have a LinkedIn page, they're on Twitter, they're on IG now. So we have, different ways we can get in contact.
Great. I really appreciate your time, Maureen. I've learned a lot from you today. I know our listeners have, and I got a feeling you're going to get some emails with some questions.
I know. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay.
This week, our guest was Maureen Murat, who is an attorney advisor in the Office of General Counsel with the DC Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking. Thank you, and we'll see you guys next week.
This show has been produced by Market Domination, LLC. To discover how you can have your own show completely done for you and turn it into a real published book and become the authority in your marketplace, go to www.marketdominationllc.com/podcast offer.